Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. Today in this video, I'll be sharing with you a few of my favorite images from a recent landscape photography trip out west, specifically to Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Overall, I think this trip was a success. I returned home with a number of images that I'm happy with, but there were some that didn't quite come together, some that for one reason or another just didn't work out, which I'll be sharing with you in this video as well. Okay, I want to start with this image here. Now, this is not an image from this year. This is an image that I took a year ago. Months later, when I was going back through images from this trip, I kept looking at this hoodoo back here. I kept looking at this particular one back here and noticing how nice it looked in the western setting sun, and it was catching the light really well, and I liked the shape of it, just from like a sculptural perspective. There was a lot to like about it, and really this whole area here is just really quite fantastic. But I kept wondering, what would it be like if I were to return, same time of year, same weather, hopefully, same, quality of light, but be closer to them, like, be more in like their presence, to feel more of their presence as opposed to, shooting them from a distance. So I went back and I made the mistake that I've done a number of times before. I think some of you have probably done this too, I would guess. I set up my tripod and I set up my camera at eye level because it's the most comfortable thing to do when you're shooting, right? And I kept noticing when I was taking the photo that it felt like I was still looking down at it. So I lowered the tripod down, and that still wasn't low enough. So I took the camera off the tripod, got rid of the tripod, put the camera flat on the ground, and then found some like little rocks and just, shimmed them up underneath the camera in order to get it level. And that is when I took this image here. And I think getting the camera down low here was absolutely the right call to make. Not just simply getting the camera low, but also leveling it against the horizon, because I was shooting a little wide here. I was shooting with the 35 to 64 GF lens, which translates roughly to like 24 millimeter to 50 something and 35 millimeter full frame. And by getting down low and leveling against the horizon, then that helps remove distortion from the image. It makes the lines a little bit straighter, and it makes the hoodoo over here just feel stronger. It gives it more presence because then it's like rising up from the floor, rising up from the ground, instead of like bending towards the camera or bending away from the camera. Image is not, quite as good as I, would have hoped, quite as good as I pre-visualized, mainly because the sky up here is just completely empty. It would have been nice to have like a little bit of atmosphere, a little bit of texture up there. That would have been cool. But as far as the light goes and the composition goes, I purposely, composed the hoodoo a little bit towards the left side of the frame to counterbalance this rock over here on the right, so that both of them together are centered in the middle, so that you have feeling a balance between the two. And then of course we have this, just fantastic golden light that's just streaming through here. And I was lucky enough to, catch the light to where it was hitting the side of the hoodoo here and hitting this rock here. Because if the rock was dark, I don't think it would feel quite the same. So I feel like this image turned out pretty well. Okay, so the next image I want to share with you here is another example of returning to a familiar landscape, a place that I've been to before, a familiar subject, to hopefully create a better photograph than previous attempts. And speaking of previous attempts, I have to share this one with you. And man, this one's rough. This one's quite embarrassing to share. Some of you probably know exactly where this is. This is a place called White Pocket that is out in the desert in Vermilion Cliffs National Monument in northern Arizona. Yeah, so many things wrong with this photo and other photos that were taken on the same trip. Not to mention the fact that I was also shooting using an older DSLR with a fairly average lens. And yeah, so one of my goals was to reshoot that particular image, was to shoot that specific subject again and to do a more proper job of it. Which is the image you see here. So same exact subject from before, but a completely different photograph. This time, I really wanted to provide context. Like I really wanted to show more of the surrounding landscape around this just fantastic rock formation that I just love. All these like swirls of color that are in it, and the really unusual like white rock that is on top of it. It's almost like an egg almost. It's been like broken apart, and like all the yellow and the red is just kind of like bleeding out in all these directions. I know it probably sounds a little grim, but that's what I see when I look at it. And by the way, just to give you a sense of scale, because I know sometimes it can be kind of hard to tell with images like this. I totally did not notice when I took this photo, there was actually another photographer in my shot, and they were way back over here. And I'll show you the original raw image here. And here you can clearly see them out in the distance. And that 100 megapixel camera certainly picked them up. And I totally did not see them when I took the photo. And obviously I took them out later on. But that should give you a sense of just how large this is and how magnificent it is. One of the things I want to mention about this image is the paper that this is printed on. So this is Hahnemühle William Turner matte paper. This is like fine art photography paper. It has this texture, it has a really subtle texture to it. It feels a lot like watercolor paper. Man, it is expensive, and it doesn't work with every image too. I find that you really have to have something with detail and texture in it in order for it to feel right on texture paper. And by the way, the other papers that I used in this video, I'll link to down below if you want to check it out. I'd like to check out the actual images that I'm sharing with you in this video. Want to see larger versions of them? You may do so by visiting my portfolio website at dominey.photography, which incidentally is a website that I put together and published using the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Whether you are publishing a new portfolio of your photography, starting a small business, or launching a new creative project, you will need a website. And Squarespace makes publishing websites a breeze with beautifully designed, clean templates that look great, domain registration, email newsletters, and even e-commerce tools to help you sell your own prints, ebooks, and other digital goods. I especially like how easy it is to upload and organize images, and how just about everything with Squarespace is customizable. Oh, and Squarespace websites also look great on mobile. Try Squarespace for 30 days absolutely free by heading over to squarespace.com/Dominey. And whenever you're ready to publish, use promo code Dominey to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Okay, let's carry on, and let's take a look at this image. Let's take a look at an aerial image. This was shot using a drone. This was shot using a DJI Mavic 3 Classic. I didn't go for the Pro model because I felt like a single lens was perfectly okay with me, and I preferred to save a little bit of money. Now, one of the things that's so great about this particular area of the country, and one of the reasons why I love traveling there, not just for like photography on the ground, but aerial photography is so wonderful there too, because there are so many landscapes there where you are free to fly a drone, especially like federal Bureau of Land Management land, where really the only rules are carry out whatever you carry in, leave no trace, all that good stuff. And as long as you are in, always check your mobile apps, right? You got to check your mobile apps, check signage of wherever it is that you're going. Definitely do not fly a drone in a national park. Most state parks don't allow them either. But there is so much land in between those areas where you are free to fly a drone, and it's not a problem. So if you are a fan of aerial photography, as I am, it's a great landscape to visit. Anyway, this image here was taken in like south central Utah, near the tiny little town of Hanksville, where Factory Butte is and all that, if you are familiar with the area. And these, I mean, they're really cool to see on the ground and really, really great to hike around and all that. But in order to truly appreciate them and see them, you really have to see them from the air. And there's just something so crazy and wonderful about, the colors of the hills here, and the contrasting blue color that you find in here as well. I mean, it's not photoshopped. I mean, these are like the actual colors. I mean, this is like truly what it looks like. Compositionally, the thing that I'm not like 100% crazy about with this photo is that I feel like this particular landmass right here, this particular hill, has a little too much presence in the image. I wished I had like gone a little bit further up. But nonetheless, it's one of my better aerial images from that trip. Okay, let's return to the ground, and next couple of images are going to be from the same place. This was taken in Glen Canyon Recreation Area down near Lake Powell in the border of Arizona in southern Utah. Fantastic landscape. I adore this place. I really do, because it's so raw. It's so primal. It's so like Jurassic. Like it's a different planet, especially when you look at it through the viewfinder of a camera. It just takes on like an entirely different. It just feels like a different world. It's also BLM land, so you can spend the night there. You can camp there again, as long as you leave no trace, all the good stuff. The one downside to this area is that it is technically a recreation area, which means that people can ride ATVs around here and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes you will see tire treads and stuff like that getting in your shot. But it's not as bad as, say, like footprints in sand dunes at like Mesquite Sand Dunes in Death Valley, something like that. It's not that bad, and you can work around it. And I don't know, maybe it's the time of year that I've always gone here, but I never have a problem with ATVs or motorcycles or anything. Like it's always very, very quiet, and hardly anyone is ever there, which is fantastic for me. Like that's perfect for me and what I'm doing. My goal was to create some depth in the image. I wanted to, shoot some images so that I was like inside of the rock formations. And I created a sense of depth by having something close to the camera in the foreground. I've heard people refer to this as dirtying the frame, which I think is a really, I really like that term, because that is essentially what's happening. It's like, so you don't have such a pristine image. You just kind of like, stick something in from the bottom or the side or something. Sometimes that could be flare. Sometimes that could be like some brush or flowers in the foreground, something like that. Just something to disrupt the otherwise static nature of the image. And that was definitely what I was trying to do here by framing it with this hoodoo that was close to me in the foreground. And then, having this one in, a little bit further back. And then this one here, which is really my main subject. That's the one I'm really excited about. And I composed this in such a way so that obviously the point of the rock is leading up towards the corner in the upper left. And so that, there's enough breathing room between everything. It's kind of like the composition within the composition, just trying to move everything around and dial it in just so. But obviously part of, what makes this image unique, and part of the reason why I like it, is because of the diagonals. It's because of those angles that just, as luck would have it, were created by, the shape of this rock here, by this hoodoo here, by the shape of this rock here, and then of course the diagonal of this one further back in the distance. And it was just, it was just begging for like, this kind of composition, for this kind of look. Super cool. And obviously another really cool thing about this landscape is the color contrast, is the orange and the blue. This blue is real. This is not Photoshop. that is actually there. Okay, next image I want to share with you is one of many from this particular location that unfortunately just didn't work. I was not particularly happy about this at all, and I wasn't particularly happy with myself more than anything else, because I feel like I misjudged what was going on here. It was cloudy and overcast most of the time that I was there, and the tonality of the sky and the color of the sky is almost exactly the same as the ground. So everything just kind of washes together and gets rather dull and gets rather kind of boring looking, and they're just flat. And sometimes you can, push these a little high key and, kind of make something out of it, which I've tried to do, but it just, I don't know, it just isn't working for me. And I was really disappointed by this. I was really hoping to come away with something better. When I get down to it, I feel like I misjudged the light, and I feel like I misjudged what was happening, and I allowed myself to become too focused on the ideal, like what it was that I wanted to create, like what it was that I had in my mind going into that landscape that I wanted to create. I feel like I allowed that to get in the way of my judgment, like my judgment on the ground when making these images. Because what I should have done in retrospect, as soon as I saw these cloudy, overcast skies up here, I should have just ignored the sky. I should have forgotten about the sky entirely. And I should have just focused on the ground. I should have just focused on details. And I did take some images like that. That's the funny thing, is that I did take a few images from there in that style, in that more like intimate style. that I do like, that I feel like that have promise, but they're not quite as good as I think they could be if I were to focus my attention on creating images like that. Like, if that was, if I went there with the intent of doing that and focused on that, I feel like I could create better images. But I was too distracted. I was like trying to make images like this work. And then I'm like focused on the ground and trying to do that work, trying to do that kind of style of image. And I don't know. I feel like I was just a little all over the place when I was doing this. And maybe it's because I'd never been there before and I was just feeling a little frazzled and a little hurried. And I'm just making excuses here, but I'm just saying that I should have read the light better. Okay, last but certainly not least, I want to talk for a minute about this image here. Now, this was taken also in New Mexico, same general area as the hoodoo image that you saw at the beginning of this video. And you may notice that it looks full frame, but it's not. I shot this with the GFX as well. I just cropped it to 3:2 because I liked this aspect ratio better for this particular photo. Otherwise, it just would have had more sky up here, which didn't really add anything. It just made everything feel a little more boxy. But by slimming it down and lengthening it this way, it just gives it, it just makes it feel a little bit nicer. So that's why that's why I cropped it this way. Okay, but the reason why I'm including this image is because, not just because of the image itself, but because this image is symbolic of something for me, something that I've been thinking about creatively, something that I'm still thinking about. And that is photographing these spaces that are kind of like the middle areas. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's kind of like these pass-through areas, these spaces that most people would just kind of like walk right through, on their way to seeing like a more impressive, arch or a more impressive rock or a more impressive something, a tree, whatever it may be. They're kind of like these quiet spaces where there's not a particularly well-defined subject. It's almost like the subject is the space itself. It's the totality of everything that's in it, as opposed to one particular thing. And for whatever reason, I'm becoming increasingly drawn to spaces like these as opposed to a singular, like, very clear subject. Because as I demonstrated earlier with the white pocket image, something I used to have a habit of doing was, going out and trying to find a thing to photograph, like a subject to photograph, a specific thing, and then finding that thing, whatever it may be, and then almost like composing a portrait of a person, I would put them like dead center in the middle of the frame, thinking that was the right thing to do, thinking that was a good thing to do. But not only, does that not provide additional context about the environment and the space in which that subject is, but it's also just not, particularly interesting either from a compositional perspective. But and that has ultimately led me down this route where now I'm starting to think more about spaces like these, not a specific thing, not a specific subject, but the space itself. I find it to be almost more welcoming in a way, more inviting than having like a very specific thing for the viewer to look at, because it doesn't leave quite as much to the imagination, I think. Like, when a photographer frames and photographs a specific thing, it's like, look at this. Like, there's no room for interpretation. There's nowhere else for the viewer, to go, for their imagination to go. Granted, I'm probably getting a little too philosophical, a little too romantic about it. I don't know. But I look at an image like this and I feel like my mind just goes in a bunch of different directions, because it's trying to sort out what exactly is happening here and where this is. And what it is that I'm supposed to like infer from this, like what is the takeaway of it? And that for me creatively is rather interesting. So this, I like this image, not just because of the light and the color and, the composition of it, and the openness of it. I think all of that is really cool, but it's also symbolic for me of something else. And I feel like this is something that I'm going to be thinking more about, and I'm, going to be working towards more of in the future, I think. Okay, so I feel like I have more photos that I could go into, but honestly, I feel like I've probably gone on long enough. I feel like I've probably overstayed my welcome at this point. So if you would be interested to learn more about, the paper that I talked about in this video, or, the printer as well that I use to print everything with, if you would like to know more about that stuff, I'll link to those products down below if you'd like to check them out. I'll link to my portfolio website as well if you'd like to check out the actual photos. And there is a link down there too to the sponsor of this video, Squarespace, if you want to sign up for a free trial and start putting your own website together, your own portfolio of work. And there will be a coupon code down there that you can use as well to save a little bit of money when you are ready to publish and go live with it. And yeah, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I appreciate the support. And if you are into landscape photography like I am, I do have a trip coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be going back out into the field again, going out to California to do some photography out there. So I'll be making some videos from there and sharing more photos as well. So remember to subscribe to this channel if you want to keep in touch with me in the future. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. Greatly appreciate it. I will see you next time.